The Marine Academy had a way of molding young recruits, transforming them from naive hopefuls into the soldiers they had dreamt of becoming. The rigid discipline, grueling schedules, and endless drills weren't easy on anyone. Among the sea of young recruits, Major Jackson and Captain Cassandra stood out, but not just for their skills. What set them apart was the unspoken connection they felt from the very beginning. The first time they crossed paths was during an early morning drill. Jackson, tall and stoic, was the type to keep to himself. Focused, driven, and serious, he approached training with an intensity that sometimes intimidated others. Cassandra, on the other hand, was a blend of grace and command. Her sharp eyes missed nothing, and she often found herself in leadership positions, even among the recruits. During a short break, the two stood by the water station. "Tough morning," Jackson muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Cassandra glanced his way, her chest still heaving from the run. "No kidding. Feels like they're trying to break us before we even start." Her voice was steady, but there was a warmth beneath it that caught Jackson off guard. For a second, their eyes met. There was an unspoken understanding between them. Both had come from small villages, driven by the same hope of rising above their humble beginnings to serve something greater than themselves. Over the next few weeks, they began to talk more. They exchanged stories during downtime about their families, their dreams, and their childhood struggles. Jackson admired Cassandra's quick wit and her unflinching ability to lead. Cassandra was fascinated by Jackson's unyielding discipline and how beneath his stoic exterior, there was a deep-seated loyalty and passion for the things he cared about. They often walked back from the mess hall together, their conversations extending far beyond the walls of the academy. It was during those quiet moments that their bond began to take root, something subtle yet undeniable growing between them, woven through their shared experiences and silent admiration for each other. A moment of serenity, months of relentless training followed, pushing their limits both physically and mentally. But amidst the chaos, the academy granted the recruits a few days of off-duty time. Jackson and Cassandra, both craving a break from the intensity, decided to visit a nearby beach resort, far from the drills and discipline of the academy. As the sun began to set, they walked barefoot along the shore, the waves kissing their feet with each gentle push of the tide. The sky was awash with hues of orange, pink, and gold, the kind of sunset that makes the world feel still. For a moment, they weren't soldiers, they were just Jackson and Cassandra, two young souls enjoying the simplicity of a serene moment. They found a quiet spot on the beach, sitting side by side on a blanket. The sound of the waves filled the silence, and for the first time in months, they felt the weight of the world lift off their shoulders. Cassandra turned to Jackson, her voice soft as the wind. "Do you ever wonder what life would be like if we hadn't joined the Marines? If we just stayed in our villages?" Jackson thought for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I do. Sometimes. But then I think, maybe this is what we were meant for. Maybe we were always supposed to end up here." He looked at her then, his gaze lingering longer than usual. "Maybe we were supposed to find each other here." Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged the deepening connection between them. The air around them seemed to shift, heavy with unspoken emotions. Jackson's hand brushed against hers, and instead of pulling away, she intertwined her fingers with his. The moon began to rise, casting a silver glow over the water. They shared a quiet dinner by the shore, laughing over shared memories and whispered hopes. It wasn't long before they realized they weren't just comrades, they were something more. In that moment of serenity, they let go of the boundaries that had kept them apart, allowing their hearts to drift closer, like two ships drawn together in calm waters. The peace didn't last long. The academy was quick to remind them that their time of rest was over. Their training intensified, and soon, they were assigned to different field exercises. Jackson was sent into the wild, untamed terrains for reconnaissance training, where he learned to navigate the harshest of environments, operating silently behind enemy lines. Meanwhile, Cassandra led urban warfare exercises in complex, simulated cities. Each day was a battle in itself, physically demanding, mentally exhausting. Despite the distance, they found ways to stay connected. Letters became their lifeline, a way to share the triumphs and frustrations of their separate journeys. Jackson's letters were brief but thoughtful, always offering encouragement and reminding Cassandra of her strength. Cassandra's letters were longer, filled with her sharp observations and bits of humor, which always made Jackson smile. Though miles apart, the distance only seemed to strengthen their bond. Each letter brought them closer, their words a refuge from the intensity of their daily lives. They shared more than just the details of their missions. They shared their fears, their dreams, and the growing sense of something deeper between them. They both knew that soon, the real tests would come. But they also knew, even without saying it, that no matter where they were, they would always find their way back to each other. Their first real mission together came sooner than expected. They were tasked with infiltrating a leftist militia suspected of carrying out violent attacks on villages near the border. It was a dangerous operation, requiring both tactical precision and nerves of steel. From the moment they were briefed, Jackson and Cassandra fell into an effortless rhythm. He led their team on the ground, moving with the kind of confidence that inspired trust, while Cassandra's strategic mind guided their every move. The operation required them to remain undercover, blending into the environment while gathering critical intelligence. There were close calls, narrow escapes that left their hearts pounding in their chests. But through it all, they relied on each other. Jackson's fearlessness on the front lines was matched by Cassandra's calculated decisions, ensuring that every step they took was deliberate and measured. One night, as they sat in a concealed hideout, Jackson turned to Cassandra, his voice low but steady. "I wouldn't want to do this with anyone else." Cassandra met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the flickering light of the small fire they had built. "Neither would I." Their connection had deepened far beyond words now. They didn't need to say it aloud. They both knew that what they had was rare, something forged in the fires of battle, trust, and a love that neither of them had expected, but both of them now needed. When the mission finally concluded, with key operatives captured and vital intelligence gathered, they returned to base, exhausted but victorious. And though the mission had been a success, it was the bond between them that felt like the most significant victory of all. Jackson's next mission was one that would test him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He was tasked with leading a mission on a remote island where a notorious terrorist group had taken refuge. The island was treacherous, its dense jungles and steep cliffs offering the enemy countless places to hide. For days, Jackson and his team combed the island, enduring harsh weather and limited supplies. The enemy was elusive, but Jackson was relentless. His leadership kept the team focused, his determination driving them forward even when exhaustion threatened to overtake them. The pursuit reached a climax one night when Jackson and his team cornered the enemy at the edge of the island. The battle that followed was fierce, but in the end, Jackson's tactical genius led them to victory. They captured the group's leader, crippling the terrorist network and securing a major victory for the Marines. When Jackson returned to base, his superiors were quick to commend him for his bravery and strategic brilliance. He received a commendation, but it was Cassandra's pride in him that mattered most. When she saw him after his return, her smile said more than words ever could. "You did it," she whispered, her hand resting gently on his arm. Jackson looked into her eyes, the weight of the mission still heavy on his shoulders, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace. "We both did." This expanded version enriches the emotional landscape of the story, diving deeper into Jackson and Cassandra's evolving relationship, their growing trust in each other, and the challenges they face both individually and together. Their bond becomes as central to the story as the missions they undertake, making each victory and trial feel all the more personal. While Jackson was off leading his mission on the island, Cassandra was facing her own formidable challenge. She had been chosen to command a high-stakes operation to take down a dangerous firearms smuggling ring that had been destabilizing the region. The smugglers were not only well-armed but ruthless, operating in the shadows of dangerous coastal territories and using the natural environment to their advantage. Cassandra's task was clear but daunting. She had to dismantle the entire network, capturing its leaders and confiscating their weapons before they could be sold on the black market. Her team relied on her precise strategic mind and unflinching courage to guide them through the mission. For days, Cassandra led her unit through rugged terrain and into hostile waters, tracking the smugglers as they moved from one remote hideout to another. Each step was a gamble, as they couldn't risk tipping off their targets too early. Tension simmered among her team, but Cassandra kept them calm and focused, knowing that one wrong move could spell disaster. One night, after a grueling day of reconnaissance, Cassandra and her team huddled together in their makeshift camp. The cold wind blew harshly against their tents, and the sound of the waves crashing against the rocky cliffs echoed in the night. Cassandra sat alone for a moment, staring into the distance, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Jackson, wondering if he was safe, if he had already completed his mission. The ache of their separation weighed heavily on her, but she pushed it aside, knowing she had to stay sharp for her team. The final confrontation came when Cassandra and her unit tracked the smugglers to a hidden cove. As dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the water, Cassandra gave the signal to strike. What followed was a chaotic and violent clash, with gunfire ringing out across the beach as her team stormed the smugglers' hideout. The smugglers were heavily armed, but Cassandra's tactical brilliance turned the tide in their favor. In the heat of battle, Cassandra found herself face to face with the leader of the smuggling ring. He was larger than she expected, with a cruel glint in his eye and a knife in his hand. But Cassandra was quicker. In a swift and calculated move, she disarmed him, bringing him to the ground with a precision that left him gasping for breath. When the dust settled, Cassandra stood victorious, her team having secured the smugglers and their cache of illegal weapons. As she surveyed the scene, a wave of relief washed over her. The mission had been a success, but more than that, she had proven to herself and to her team that she could lead them through even the most dangerous of operations. Later, as she debriefed with her superiors, Cassandra's calm under pressure and flawless execution earned her a promotion, solidifying her status as one of the most respected officers in the Marines. But despite the accolades, her thoughts once again returned to Jackson. She longed to share this victory with him, knowing that their separate journeys were only making their eventual reunion that much sweeter. Weeks passed, and finally, Jackson and Cassandra found themselves back at the Marine base. Both had undergone grueling missions, both had faced death and danger head-on, and both had emerged victorious. The Marines recognized their bravery and exceptional leadership by awarding them the Medal of Valor, one of the highest honors bestowed upon officers in the line of duty. The ceremony was held under a cloudless sky, with hundreds of fellow Marines standing at attention as Jackson and Cassandra stood side by side, receiving their medals. Their chests were swollen with pride, not just for themselves, but for each other. They had traveled separate paths, faced different challenges, but now they were together again, united in their triumphs. As the general pinned the medal to Jackson's chest, he caught Cassandra's eye, his gaze softening for just a moment. She smiled back, her eyes gleaming with pride for the man she had come to admire more than anyone. When it was Cassandra's turn, Jackson's chest swelled with a quiet admiration. Watching her receive her own Medal of Valor was a moment he would never forget. After the ceremony, as their comrades congratulated them, Jackson and Cassandra found a quiet moment together beneath the shade of a towering oak tree. For a long while, they didn't speak, simply letting the weight of their shared experiences and victories settle between them. "I'm proud of you, you know," Jackson said softly, his fingers brushing against hers. Cassandra's heart fluttered at the touch, the intensity of her feelings for him overwhelming in that moment. "And I'm proud of you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft rustling of leaves. The world around them seemed to fade away as they stood there, lost in each other's eyes. It was a moment of stillness amidst the chaos of their lives, a moment that spoke of promises, of a bond that had been forged through fire and strengthened with every battle they had fought, both together and apart. After the ceremony, Jackson and Cassandra were granted some well-deserved leave. For the first time in years, they returned to their villages, together. Their families, who had always supported them from afar, now welcomed them with open arms, their pride evident in every embrace, every smile. Jackson and Cassandra decided to build their homes next to each other, side by side, just as they had been throughout their marine careers. The village, nestled between rolling hills and surrounded by lush greenery, was the perfect place for them to reconnect with their roots. In the mornings, they would sit on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the sun rise over the hills, the simplicity of village life a balm for their battle-worn souls. They spent their days visiting family, reconnecting with old friends, and walking through the fields where they had once dreamed of a life far beyond the village. Now, they had returned, not as the children who had left, but as accomplished Marines, stronger, wiser, and deeply in love. One evening, during a family gathering, Jackson's mother pulled Cassandra aside, her eyes twinkling with warmth. "He's always been a quiet one," she said, nodding toward Jackson, who was laughing with some old friends. "But ever since you came into his life, I've never seen him so happy." Cassandra felt a lump form in her throat, her heart swelling with affection for the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word. "He makes me happy too," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. The break from duty allowed them to relax, to enjoy the simple pleasures of life that they had fought so hard to protect. But even as they embraced the peace of the village, they both knew that their duty as Marines wasn't over. They still had a mission, both to their country and to each other. Inspired by their journey and the people they had become, Jackson and Cassandra decided to give back to the community that had raised them. Together, they founded a charitable organization aimed at improving the lives of the villagers. They provided scholarships for young children, healthcare services for the elderly, and job training programs to help those struggling to make a living.